In this chapter, we want to deal with what a dancer needs a lot: rotations. Everywhere in dancing, we turn. Left, right, on the spot, moving. But what is really the difference between turning to the right and turning to the left? In the book, turns to the right are generally talked about as natural turns. Because of our direction of dance and our position together with the lady, the turn to the right appears very natural. Now, natural turns are done totally different than reverse turns. We have to think that our rotations always start in the center, in the muscles, which are really like a girdle around the body. These muscles are starting rotations. The shoulders are resting on the torso, and you will feel when you rotate that under your head that automatically your legs are involved too. But the main action is inside here in the center. When we come to turning to the right, can I borrow you please? You will feel, stand here, that when we just stand and I'm turning my center, she can easily follow me. A turn to the right is a very natural turn. So what will happen is that I give the lady the initiative movement to turn, always on the preceding step to a turn to the right. On this step, during my lowering action, I start to turn, and the turn goes all through the variation of a natural turn. For instance, a natural turn, or whatever variation we choose to dance. This is because I have to actively initiate the movement. It's called an active turn. All turns to the right, active turns, initiating before the first step of the variation. When we come to turns to the left, the reverse turns, everything is just the opposite. I would not be allowed to start a turn, because you can easily see when I would start a turn before the first step, our positions would go over each other. So I'm allowing the lady to go first by releasing in my right leg. She goes on the curve and I follow. So this is actually a turn which I'm not supposed to do. It's called a passive turn. And that applies to all reverse turns. Every reverse turn is a passive turn. Now we have turns which are over a certain amount of steps. The most important thing that we have to understand is the turns over 3 steps, which is our basic amalgamations in waltz and foxtrot, and quickstep and Viennese waltz. To be able to do that as a couple, one part is the active part, one part has to do one kind of a passive action. And we will see that first in Alessandra, which is a pointing step. So in the natural turn, she would dance the first step, and now she would do a pointing step, which means her foot is pointing into the direction that she later wants to go. Also, that means the weight transfer is later, and third, the rising will be later. So if then she transfers the weight to the pointing step, now you see the completion of the turn. That's what the lady does in the backward half. If the man has a backward half, he does exactly the same. He steps, he has a pointing step, and only later he transfers weight and completes the turn. Of course, there's an exception to everything, and the exception to the pointing step without the completion of the turn is the feather finish. In the feather finish, we can't complete the turn. Now watch it from here. I'm doing the pointing step, and if I would complete from here, I would run her over. So I'm not completing the turn. I leave the same position as started with the pointing step. What we would like now to see from William and Alessandra is a complete natural turn, where you see the initiative turn from before the first step, and you will also see the pointing steps by the backward dancing partner. Can we please see a natural turn, a complete natural turn? Now notice the start of the turn on the preparation step now. He does the pointing step and lowering. So could we see, please, a reverse turn, where we don't have the initiative rotation, allowing her to move first and allowing her to move first. Thank you. So actually the reverse turn starts nearly with a kind of a side lead before the actual turn comes in. The next thing we have to discuss is two very, very important parts of movements, the so-called open turns. Open turns are turns which are finishing in open position. Very, very characteristic for the slow foxtrot, but we also have some of those in the waltz or in the quickstep. An open turn has to be, at the beginning, quite close on the spot if it's danced in a normal dance position. So if we dance in a normal dance position, we start in close position, the man should and must lead the lady to a heel turn. That is an open turn in foxtrot. That's our basic. Could you please do one open natural turn, please? As an example. So from here, the lady would have a heel turn, and then we have the open position in the end. Now, if we include, thank you, if we include this step into a dance like waltz, where the kind of swing is totally different than foxtrot, a heel turn does not make any sense at all. So here, the only chance we have doing an open natural turn into the waltz would be from promenade position. Starting in promenade and going from the promenade into an open natural turn. That was easy. Today you will see a trend where couples dance in the waltz an open natural turn from close position without the heel turn. That automatically leads to the point the lady will get ugly, ugly leg actions. So never ever do that you dance from a close position, an open turn, without the heel turn, because it simply doesn't look elegant. Technically, it's wrong. Now, we spoke about the three-step turns, which are the close, natural, and reverse turns, as well as the open turns. There's also a step which goes over two steps, which is called the spin turn. A spin turn is consisting of two steps, while the second step is basically put to the side. So we have the normal spin turn. It starts with a pivoting action, pivot for the man, a spin turn, and we are finishing slightly back. If we underturn, we would go from here diagonally back. If we overturn, we land nearly to the side. Pivot, spin turn, side. Now that allows the lady to have a beautiful brush step and also to continue with the toe from the brush step and not with the heel. And the last form of turns we do have are pivots. Pivots are done on one step. If we turn to the right as a pivot, we have a step on the left foot, which I show from here. It's on the left foot, backwards. We spin, we pivot on the ball of the foot. Before we leave the foot, the heel touches the floor and propels us forward again. So the active part is the rotation part. And as we already heard, rotation starts in the center. I would be starting to rotate my center, place my foot, and the rotation of my body makes my foot rotate. I would like to ask William and Alessandra now to do a whole combination of the steps that we've just seen. And we would do a natural turn, pivots into a spin turn, into an overturn turning lock, an open natural turn, and an outside change. The last point for this chapter is a position or an action which is described in the technique book quite often, but has not actually been taught in the former competitive years, like myself or even before. It's called contrary body movement, CBM. CBM is the movement of shoulder to hip towards the free leg. which is actually the most natural movement you can have because you use it already when you walk. Now that we do have quite often at the beginning of a turn on the first step. Today, CBM is suddenly rediscovered as the latest discovery and is made into a big MGM production, unfortunately with complete wrong results. As I said before, CBM is the most natural movement in the world. I step with my right foot, I move my left side, I have a beautiful rotation, which is called CBM. Today it is done artificially. So what we get is what we demonstrate to you now. Can I please ask William and Alessandra to show step one of a natural turn or a feather step with artificial CBM. Now they are specifically trying to do that and nearly falling, of course, because it's completely out of balance. You see that the weight of the head has nothing to do with a standing foot. The bum is sticking out to the right side. It has nothing to do with CBM at all. Thank you. Can you please do it the correct way, which is probably less painful? So from here, the head is connected to the right foot, and under the head, the rotation starts. That is the correct CBM. The first one is wrong. Thank you. Now, I guess the wrong version is basically taken because people try to impress through a so-called big top line. Unfortunately, balance is the most important thing for a dancer. And if I try to do this, I'm completely out of balance, and I do believe experts still can see that this has nothing to do with correct ballroom dancing.